Hi, Tom.
Oh, hi, everybody.
Today we have scheduled about 35 minutes and would like to start with Tim to discuss certain topics families should know when they're hiring household employees. And then maybe we can turn it over to Tom and talk about some of the solutions on how to make that life easier for, for families. In particular, I would like to discuss today the implications, what the difference is between hiring an international J1 AuPair visa holder versus hiring the domestic nanny or domestic household staff. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Tim.
Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Tim Johnson. I'm going to focus more on the au pair host family side, and I believe that Tom is going to do a little bit more on the household uh, domestic domestic side. Although I'm familiar with both also, so hopefully between the two of us, everyone gets lots of good information today. So I mean, I'm going to dive right in here, and one of the things that as since you are a host family for foreigners, one of the things to know is that obviously your au pairs may come to you for some occasional advice, and so I think it's important for you to know a little bit about their situation as well as your own. And so in general, the au pairs are going to be considered to be non-resident aliens, as opposed to a lot of people initially think that they might be considered to be a student, which means that the big implication of that is that they do need to file U.S. tax returns if they meet our filing requirement here in the U.S. Their stipend that they get paid is going to be subject to U.S. taxation, and they're going to file a form. In general, most of them are going to file a form 1040 NR-EZ. So everyone's familiar with their 1040 form, their individual tax return. NR is for non-resident, and then EZ is because it's a short form, easy type form to show their stipend. And if they're over $3,800 per year or even close to that, they really should be filing that tax return, and that's obviously on a calendar year, just like yours and my tax return is on. And then just in order to, it's sometimes scary for the au pairs to understand how much tax they will pay. So I did include just a quick estimate of table here that if they're at $3,000 stipend level, they're not going to owe any tax. $6,000, about $225 of tax, down to $13,000 of stipend, they're going to owe about $1,000 of tax. So that way, if they're wanting to know how much tax they will be paying, it's just an estimate of what it is. And go to the next slide here. I'm sorry, why is this not going? There we go. And so your au pair is not considered to be an employee as we might consider, like later when Tom discusses a household employee, in that they are on a J1 non-immigrant visa standard with the State Department, and so that means that they're not going to have any Medicare or Social Security taxes withheld, no income tax withheld, and no federal unemployment tax withheld. Which makes it very easy to administer from a host family perspective, in that you don't have to file payroll tax returns, withhold money on behalf of your au pairs. You don't even issue them Form W-2. But that doesn't mean that if they're not getting a W-2 that they're not required to file a tax return, as we just spoke about. The au pair still needs to file a return, even though they're not getting a W-2. So very easy from the host family perspective for au pair taxation, which is great. From obviously there is cost to you as a host family when you're paying your au pair stipend. But I wanted to bring to your attention a couple things that for both au pair families and domestic employee type families, that there is some offset available when you file your family personal tax return, not your au pair's tax return, but your personal return, in that there's a credit for a child's independent care expenses, which is in general going to be $600 for one child and $1,200 for two or more. So it's not $600 per child, but if you have three, it's still $1,200. If you have five, it's $1,200, as well as two, it's $1,200. And essentially, what that credit is 20%. It's a sliding scale, but for most people, it's going to be 20% of a maximum dollar amount, which is the $3,000 for one child and $6,000 for two. So you get to $600 by multiplying 3,000 times 20% credit, and then we get to $1,200 by multiplying $6,000 allowed expenses times 20%. And you do report your au pair. This is the only area that you would actually be reporting your au pair's information to the government from a tax perspective, outside of immigration type stuff. But from a tax perspective, since we're not filing payroll tax returns, we do need to complete Form 2441, which is part of your personal tax return. And you would report your au pair's information, their name, address, social security number, how much you paid them on that 2441. And that's how you personally get some benefit from the government for employing that au pair. Then the second area of benefit that a lot of us would be able to benefit from is if your employer has a flexible spending account. And this is offered through many employers, not all, it's not a requirement, it's just an employee benefit that a lot of employers do offer, and that's you receive up to about $5,000 per family that you would get effectively tax free. So you would get reimbursed for $5,000 per year per family to help you offset the cost of your au pair. And it's your own money that you're getting reimbursed. It's just that it's in a tax-free environment. So instead of having $5,000 of wages taxed to you, you would essentially have $5,000 that would be untaxed to you. So it's a great thing. The FSA does there is a partial reduction on the or the credit for child independent care expenses. So you don't get a fully double dip in that you get tax benefits for the first $5,000, and then also there's up to $1,200 credit. There's some offset on that, but there still is, even if you use your flexible spending account, there still is some credit available. So it's a good thing.
And then the cost families can deduct is basically the stipend they pay to the au pair.
That's right.
As well as the agency fee, because that's
part of the
Medicare expenses.
That's
so
correct.
Should families then both the stipend payment record and the agency invoices here, although it's much more than $5,000, or should they just choose one or the other if it's not exceeding?
Once you hit your flexible spending account amount, you're not going to be able to submit more than $5,000. So there's no benefit to submitting more than $5,000 under the flexible spending account perspective. And then on the credit, I believe that you are supposed to indicate the total amount paid for the au pair. And from a practical perspective, I generally would probably put down the au pair's information as long as I hit my 3,000 or 6,000, and then be done with it at that point. But if let's say I hired my au pair later in the year, and that I have 2 children, and maybe I paid my au pair only $3,000 for that calendar year, so I still have some available credit to get to that 6,000, and then at that point I would put down the amount that was paid to for the for the fees. And then just some practical recommendations that we have would be to keep track of your stipend payments paid to your au pair. And this is not only for tax reasons, but just it's a general good a good practice for both the au pair and for the family. So that way, there's no disputes over did I get paid for that time for that week. I would suggest maybe even having them both host family and the au pair just initial that payment was received and made. So that way, there's no dispute over did I get paid or not. And then it also helps. It'll give you something that you can provide to your CPA or tax preparer when it comes time to prepare your personal tax return, and that you would be able to provide that stipend record form to your tax preparer along with your au pair's name, address, and social security number, so that way you can get those tax benefits on the child and dependent care credit. And then, also, I would recommend, there's no requirement that you do this, but I would just remind your au pair about their U.S. tax filing requirements, especially from the perspective of not only paying the tax, but also being able to travel back to the U.S. If there was ever an issue with their visa. I'd hate for it to be because of their lack of filing tax returns with the U.S. government, and maybe also help them to navigate to the IRS's website so they can get the forms from the IRS and so on and so forth. And then before I release it over to Tom, I do have a couple just resources here that are helpful for both host families and the candidates also, in that the IRS does have a publication on au pairs, which is very, very helpful. So I would suggest you maybe reading through that, and also sharing that with your family's au pair also, because it speaks from both sides on that. The 2441 is the credit form for dependent care expenses, as well as then the 1040 NR-EZ form, which is again found on the IRS's website, as well as that the dependent care expense form also. So that's what I have. I do, obviously this is our our insurance type stuff that we have to do with every presentation, but this is meant to be a general discussion. It's not personalized to your situation, so you're solely responsible for your own tax situation, yada yada yada. And then this is, although this isn't written advice, I still do like to let you know that the IRS is probably not going to allow you to get out of penalties based upon a presentation that you may have heard. So that's what this boils down to. And so if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to entertain those, or if you want to wait until after Tom has spoken, and so I know that he has some great information also.
Okay, you want me to take over from here?
Yeah, Tom, if I think if you can still hear me, I'm good.
Okay, well, let's see if I can advance to the next slide.
I'm just checking the question very quick, and it seems that we were breaking off when we discussed, or when we addressed the question on if there were information provided to the au pair candidates in our program about how to file taxes. And the answer is yes, we have provided a webinar quite like this one together with Tim on how to file the federal taxes by April 15th. But we have not discovered each an individual state. So that's still something which would be great to find out in your individual state if the au pair has to pay state level taxes. And if a host family could make a call to the local authority to find out, that would be great. In states like Texas or in Washington State where there's no tax requirement, that's an easy one. But I know in states like New York or in California, there's an extra requirement to also file state taxes. So it looks like we had some question of the audio in general. I have everybody muted, and I am only answering the questions who come through the chat, so we don't have anyone else on speaker. So we will answer these questions as they come on. And I will turn over the presentation screen to Tom.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Tom Breedlove.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Okay.
Make presenter. Okay. So now we see.
Okay. Let's see. Show my screen.
Now we can see your screen. Wonderful. So Tom, if you could introduce yourself very quick on, what your service is all about and how many families you have been serving over the last years, before we go into the nuts and bolts of what families should think about and know to be prepared.
Okay, great. Yeah, we Breedlove and Associates we're a specialist in household payroll. So we help families if they have a nanny. So like Tim was saying, the the obligations and requirements for a host family hiring an au pair are relatively simple. But when you hire a nanny or any other kind of household employee, then all of a sudden the obligations do get a little more cumbersome. And that is where we come in, to make sure that everything is handled properly and make sure that there is no onerous paperwork to deal with. So I don't know if I'm having some trouble with the slides. I'm not seeing the slides that I put together, but I think I can kind of walk everybody through quickly what the key obligations are. I'm sorry.
Tim, do you want us to pull up the slides and then just have you speak to it?
Yeah, if you have the ones that I sent you, that'd be great.
Okay. So Tom, you just direct us if you need us to switch to the next.
Okay, yeah, this is great. Okay, well here's what I was going to run through, and this makes it a lot easier when you have some visuals. When a family has a household employee, they are required to withhold certain taxes from the employee's pay. So if you have a nanny, the required taxes, the dark blue boxes, are Social Security and Medicare. Those are not obviously required taxes in an au pair situation, but when it's an employee, when it's a nanny, the family is required to either withhold this from the nanny's pay, or they will be required to pay it on her behalf. So the total is 7.65% of the gross pay. So it is important. A lot of people don't understand that and don't withhold those dollars from the employee's payroll, and then at some point later, if they get caught, then they end up having to pay that. So it is important to make sure that this is clear with the nanny and make sure she understands that these are payroll taxes, and they actually go to fund her retirement. So they're not going to the general fund really. She gets earning credits for these, which will ultimately fund her retirement benefits when she retires. So they're very important taxes, and everybody is required to do this. So but the family has the obligation of actually withholding it. So that those taxes are required. We don't, it's not required in the household employment world that you also withhold income taxes. So state and federal income taxes are kind of considered optional. But we highly recommend families withhold those taxes as well. simply because what tends to happen is it tends to become problematic, especially a full-time nanny situation where she might be making $20,000 or $25,000 in a year, sometimes more. That obligation on the state and federal income tax side can be large enough to where if she's not having it withheld, she's going to get hit with a huge burden at the end of the year. She could be subject to underpayment penalties, which can be somewhat add to the, they add to the expense, and fairly traumatic for someone who's kind of living paycheck to paycheck to have this huge burden at the end of the year. Can be very, very difficult. So while a family is withholding these other taxes that are required, we highly recommend that they go ahead and withhold excuse me, state and federal income tax as well. And those the amounts that you withhold there are determined based on what the employee fills out on a W-4 form. The W-4 is that little form where you check single or married and you choose the number of allowances. And once you select that, then the family is just required to use those allowances and those settings and then deduct those dollars from the pay. So one of the tools that we have to try to make this a little easier for families is we have a free employee paycheck calculator. So a family or a nanny can plug their dollars into our calculator and it'll tell you exactly what the net pay should be. So if you want to advance the slide, I'll kind of jump to the employer taxes, which is sort of the next piece of this. In an AuPair situation, employers aren't paying taxes, but in a nanny situation, they are. And so the required taxes for the employer are that they are required to match the amount of the Social Security Medicare payments that we talked about before, that the employee is paying 7.65%, and the employer pays an equal amount. And so the total of that, which is 15.3%, goes to the government, and then will fund her retirement benefit. So when you pay legally and do this correctly, you're contributing a healthy amount to your nanny's retirement benefit. So that feels good for a lot of folks. The other taxes that are involved for the employer are state and federal unemployment taxes. On the state side, that tends to be about 1 to 3%. It does vary quite a bit by state, and there's usually it's usually on a certain amount of wages, and then once you hit that, the 13,000 or 15,000, whatever that threshold is, it varies by state. Once you hit that, then you've fulfilled your obligation and you don't have to pay any more taxes. On the federal side, it's a really small tax. It's only actually it's 0.6% now on the first $7,000. So it comes out to about $42 a year. So the unemployment taxes aren't huge, but they are part of the process, and it does go to fund unemployment benefits if you lay off your nanny, and she applies for unemployment benefits, then she will be able to get some assistance between jobs. So that's a very important benefit. Next slide, please. I'll skip this because what Tim went through on the tax break side is really identical for whether you have a nanny or an AuPair. So the same tax breaks that he talked about are listed here, and we do have we have an employer budgeting calculator. Some people might find this helpful, where you can plug in the wages that you're planning to pay an employee, and it will calculate what the tax liability will be for you as an employer, as well as what your tax breaks will be. So you can see your tax savings depending on how many kids you have and whether you have an FSA or not. And it'll tell you what your total cost will be. So if you might find that helpful, that's at breedlove.com.
That's great. Thanks, Tom.
Okay. Oh, you bet. Next slide. Yeah, okay. There is a couple of little tips I'll share with folks to try to help save a little bit of money. There are a few categories of compensation which are considered non-taxable, which means that neither the family nor the nanny would have to pay any taxes on this portion of the compensation. And the categories are health insurance. So if you contribute to a nanny's health insurance, then the amount of your contribution would not be taxable to either party. The same thing is true for college tuition and books, but it has a limit of $5,250 per year. So if you happen to be hiring a nanny who is also going to school, then keep this in mind, because it can be a great way to sort of shelter some of the money and save everybody some tax dollars. The same holds true with parking and public transportation, then those are capped out at $245 per month. There are a few places, a few states that have created limits that are slightly less than that, but generally speaking, it's $245 per month is the limit on that. And then the final bucket of non-taxable compensation is cell phone. So if your nanny has a cell phone, you can actually pay for her service and not have it be considered compensation.